Hello everyone, nice to meet you. My name is Arthur, and in this video we'll be talking about JWT authentication in Node.js APIs. So just a disclaimer here, we're not gonna talk about JWT in details. I've done a video about this. You can check on my YouTube channel in which we go into details about what are JWT tokens, the difference between stateless and stateful, and how you can implement one from scratch without using any library. So I highly recommend you to check that video, but if you only want to use JWT inside your application, you can stick to this one and then you can go there and check how JWT works with more details, okay? So the goal for this class is that we go through some basics about authentication versus authorization. We understand the difference between session storage and JWT, and then we'll move straight into the code, okay? We'll be working with Fastify, we'll be working with Prisma, with Docker, and I will be walking you through the entire process, okay? This is gonna be a long class, and let's start with it, okay? So the first thing that we need to understand is what is exactly authentication. So you can think about authentication using different types of inputs. So that could be email and password. We are really used to that. Nickname and password, biometrics. So for example, you could use your face to authenticate API keys. So there are multiple types of authentication. But basically, we want to authenticate when we want to access resources that are private to you, that are private to your users. So let's suppose you want to get the leads for the latest clients or something on your company. You need to be logged in, you need to be authenticated in order to access that. And one example that makes it easier to understand is if we imagine a company. So a company has multiple employees, and every time someone joins the company or enters the company, we need to validate if that user has their credentials valid or not, if he is really an employee or not, if it's another person. And in order to do that, the person usually shows their badge number or their employee ID to the guard, to someone that works in the security of the company. And that person will actually validate and authenticate that user to be able to enter the company, or in our case, to be able to access our application. So that is authentication. It's basically just passing your data, passing your information. The guard will check and see if those are valid, and if they're valid, then you can join and access the resources. Now, authorization, in the other hand, is when, for example, you want to access things from different rooms. So every company has an HR team, a finance team, a product team, engineering team, marketing, and so on. So what happens when that employee, which is HR employee, wants to access the finance records or the marketing records? It's not from their responsibility to access or to have access to those files or to those resources. So that is authorization. It's when you're already inside the company or already inside the organization, there are things that you can access and things that you cannot access. And that is authorization. We're not going to cover authorization right now, but we will do that on a future video, okay? So right now, the goal for this video is really to understand about authentication, but that's just like a small idea about how this works, okay? So now going back to JWT and authentication, let's go a little bit more technical, all right? So we have a few types of authentication. We have the basic authentication, which is the most basic one possible. It is when we logged in and we want to access resources. And in order to validate, we need to pass our email and password on every request. Of course, that's totally bad. We don't want to do that, but it is possible you can actually do that. Usually that happens when we pass inside the headers an authorization property with the basic, and we encode that with a base64 encoder. So we'll be passing that on every request, and on every request we will check that on the server to see if those are valid email and password for that user. We don't want to do that. We don't want to pass the email and password every time. That's not safe. That's really not a good idea. So we have here another option, which is the session storage, which is also pretty common, okay? So what happens in the session storage is that you pass your email and password to the server, and the server returns a session ID, all right? The session ID is the ID that corresponds to a data inside a new database. So that's why it comes with this storage naming in here, because we are literally gonna create a new database, okay? So we have a few options for that. So once the email and password goes to the server and we've checked the credentials and they're fine, what happened is that we create a new session ID. That session ID can be in memory, which is not a really good idea. Let's imagine your EC2 or your instance goes down, all your users will be logged out. So it's not really a good idea, but it's possible to do that. We can save that in a cache database like Redis, which is super good. It's usually the approach that they use for this type of authentication is saving that in Redis, for example. Or we can even create a new entirely database. We can use Dynamo, Postgres, whatever, just for you to create and just store your session storage, okay? So once you go through that process, you create that ID inside the memory and you return that back to the client, usually by cookies, so you can like set cookies and pass the session ID. And on every protected route, on every request, we will be sending the session ID to the server so that the server can return for us protected resources, okay? So that's a good approach, but it has some really big limitations. The first good thing about this one is that if you want to invalidate someone or if you want to log out someone specifically, you can just delete their record from the database and he will be logged out. But the problem with this approach is that it adds too much complexity and it adds too much traces. That makes it a stateful approach, okay? In the other hand, we have a stateless approach, which we covered in more details in the other video, which is the JWT approach, okay? So JWT are self-contained tokens. They contain all the necessary information to check if that user is valid or not. I'm not gonna go into full details about it, but here we have an example of a JWT token. We can see we have, for example, the sub, which is the account ID, the name of the user, if it's admin or not, the issue ad, which is the date it was created, and this is helpful if we want to check if that user has expired or not. And the most important thing, we have a secret. That is what I'm gonna say if this is valid or not. So if I type some random number here, you can see that is invalid. It is a valid JWT, like the format, but it's invalid signature. So if the secret changes, the user would be logged out because this is not a valid JWT anymore, all right? So what happens in this approach is that we pass it through the same thing. We go to the server, we check the credentials by hitting the database. We will do that step by step, and then we return an access token with the JWT. All right. So now every time the user wants to request resources that are private, we pass that inside the headers as a bearer token, passing the JWT, and that is pretty good because this is stateless. So there's nothing saved in the database. There's no more things added, because this can get really pricey as well, because if you have multiple users, those are things that are being added to your database, and that has a cost. Okay, and that's really useful, especially when you go into more complex architectures. So for example, you have a client here and you have a load balancer now that distributes traffic to multiple servers. Okay, so let's suppose we are on a session storage. What happens if you do a login and this server and they saves the user session ID in memory? When you, for example, you now, let's suppose you're gonna request for resources in the other server. This server has no idea that you are logged in because the data is inside here. So in memory would never work for this case. So that's why in a session storage approach, we would basically just create the session ID, for example, in one of those servers that will be added in, for example, the cache memory DB from AWS. And every time we request something that is protected, we will check that in Redis. In the other hand, if we are working with JWT, all that you need is a secret key, which will be in each one of those servers, and they can check if that token is valid or not just by their secret key. Okay, so that's it. Just a basic overview on some different types of things. The difference between session storage and the JWT. We'll cover more about this later, especially about refresh tokens and things like that, but that's for the next classes, all right? But for now, we just needed to understand that we'll be focusing on JWT, and we'll be doing that using Fastify and Prisma, okay? And that's basically it. I hope I can see you in the next video, and let's just go straight into okay, without any further ado, let's jump right into the code. So I have created this folder, Node API JWT. You can call it whatever you want. The first thing that I'm gonna do is initiating our Node.js project, okay? You can use npm, you can use yarn init -y. I'm gonna use pnpm for this project, okay? So for pnpm, it's just pnpm init. So that's gonna start and create for us our package.json. We're just gonna change this in a few seconds, okay? I'm gonna start by installing a few dependencies that we will be needing. So I'm gonna install TypeScript. I'm gonna install add types node, which are the types for Node.js, and tsx for running this locally, and then -dev, because those are all dev dependencies, okay? Once that's good, another thing that we need to do is in order for us to use TypeScript, we need to do a tsc init, okay? That's gonna generate for us our ts config in here, all right? One of the things that I like to do is keeping both of those ES-next, I guess. We can check that later. But yeah, that's basically it. Another thing that we can do is right now just create a source folder, and inside of it, we're gonna have index.ts, okay? And now here inside package.json, I'm gonna change this to dev, and in here I'm gonna change to do a tsx, and then we're gonna do a watch module, and then a source index.ts, and I'm already gonna have like a build script. We can add a build, or like prod or start, like to start the production environment, the one that we'll be building. So that's just gonna be node, probably gonna be on a file or on a folder named build or gist, dist, and this is gonna be index.js, okay, just to keep it standard. Another thing that I do like to use is editor.config. So if you have that extension, it's pretty simple. Just go over here and find for editor config, install it, and then you're gonna click on the right side of your mouse and just generate this editor config. I like to keep those two last options as true, so I do like to insert a final line and trailing white spaces, okay? Another thing that I like to do is initiating working with ES-linked, okay? So the first thing that I'm gonna do is do npx/linked init, okay? Those are my configurations. You can follow those or not. Those are really optional and up to you. What do you want to link? I want to link JavaScript. How would you like to link? I would like to check syntax and find problems. I'm using import and export. I'm using Node, so no React. I'm gonna keep with yes, because we're gonna use TypeScript. This is a Node project. I wanna be written in TypeScript, and I want to install ESLint, ESLint.js, and everything that it needs, and using pnpm for doing so. Okay. So it generated for us this eslink.config.mts, and that's all we need for our eslink file. Okay, now I'm not sure if I mentioned that before, but we are gonna work with Postgres and Docker, and in order to access things inside our database, we can actually use a few ORM So we have, for example, the Drizzle. Drizzle is a super good RM that we can be using on next videos as well. I do like this pretty much. Documentation is great, and yeah, it's super useful. But I'm gonna keep with Prisma. It's also super intuitive to use, and it's really well written, so we're not gonna have any problems with that. I highly recommend you to check the documentation as well. Okay, so the first thing that I'll be doing right now is just installing Prisma as dev dependence, and what we need to do after that is just hitting up npm Prisma init to actually start it. And Prisma init is gonna generate for us a few nice files. I don't know what this Claude or agent really is. Initialize it. Oh, that's new for me, but it seems they created a .windsurf and a .cloud file. Okay, that's nice, but I think those are too much for me right now, so I'm probably just gonna delete those two. Okay, there's also this agent file, which is super worth checking later, but the only thing that I really want right now is this schema.prisma. all right, so here we have this output with the generated Prisma. This is going to be really useful when we connect with Prisma client. All right, just gonna keep it like this. And one of the things that you need to run to make this working, you need to run this script. Okay, so docker run name pg, which is the name of the of our container. So I do have it running in here already. So if I come here to containers, no, pg is not running. So let me do a docker run. Let's see. Okay, so now I'm all set. I had to restart again, but if we do a docker ps, we can see that we have Postgres and the name is pj, and we can actually see here on my Docker desktop that we have pj running on 5432, which is a Postgres image. All right, by the end of this video, we'll move this to a Docker Compose just because it's better. But for now, let's just stick with this process. Okay, so the first thing that we need to do right now is I want to change this env environment. It created this big, like huge environment configuration, so on and so on, and I don't really like this process of getting it. So what we can do is just remove it, and let's use this one, which is basically what we need. So here we have Postgres, we have routes, which are the user and password. We have the localhost and the 5432, which is the Postgres port, and YouTube auth is our database name. Okay, so let's create that database. And one of the ways we can do that is by accessing Docker the Postgres itself. So we can do a Postgres exec and actually get inside of it. And now that we are inside, we can get inside that pg image by doing a psql -o and paste it routes. And in here, one of the ways that we can do that is that we can, I think we've run create database and actually do YouTube auth, add a semicolon at the end. It already exists. I'm trying to remember, we can database, but I mean, we could drop the database. Here we can see that we have a select. That's not what I want. We could drop the database like this. Let me see. Drop. But all I want to say to you is that all you need to do is just type create database. I'm not gonna drop it. Database. Probably I've written something wrong in here. I'm gonna check that later. But basically, you don't need to drop anything. Just create the database and just add this, and then you can connect to it like using this property in here. That's one of the ways that we can actually create our database inside Postgres. Okay, now with that done, we can exit this and exit this as well and move back into Prisma. And here in Prisma, for this project, for this class, I'm just gonna create one model, which is just one table. Okay, so we're gonna call this model accounts, and I highly recommend you to install the Prisma extension that we have in here. Okay, so with that, we need to set a few things. So of course we need an ID. Okay, and since we are using Postgres, we have a few cool properties like this one from UIID. Basically, we can also set a default option to create a UIID automatically to us when we register this the first time. We can also create a name. We can also create an email, which is going to be in a string and it's going to be unique. And we also gonna have a password, which is also going to be a string. Okay, and in order for us to map this accounts into a database itself, all we need to do is do a map and call this account. So I'm gonna keep this, I'm gonna make this one singular and make this one plural. So we have multiple accounts, but we have only one model of what an account actually is. And in order to do the migration, which is like the Git process for database, I was actually gonna commit this, is just by doing a Prisma, Prisma migrate dev. Oh no, PNPM, sorry. Prisma migrate dev. Okay, so I just copy and paste and change it that previous value to what we have in here, but I want to do something different now. I want to, instead of using that YouTube auth, I'm going to add a YouTube auth dev or something like this, and just so that we can create our own database from scratch. Okay, so let's just do a docker exec pg, and here inside of it we can actually run a PostgreSQL root, and here we can actually do something like create database and actually call it YouTube auth dev. All right, so that's all we need. I think we can list it by doing something like let me check. I think there is a way for us to, yeah, I think it's DT. There's no finding table, so we can actually get inside of it. We can do a YouTube auth dev. Does not exist in previous connection server. That's odd. Oh yeah, it definitely failed because we didn't add a semicolon at the end. Okay, syntax error, of course, is not gonna let us do like this. Okay, so we created the database. Now we can actually get inside of it. So you can do like dev, and now you can see that we are connected to it. If I run a DT here, we see that of course there are no tables right now. Okay, so let's change this to be dev. So we're gonna connect using dev. I already have here a model with an ID, a name, an email, which is unique, password, and map to accounts. So we're gonna create a new table named accounts, and just let's keep this simple by just having this one. And of course this was generated, and yeah, with that in mind, let's just create this. So we're gonna do a migration, which is just like the Git for databases and for ORMs like Prisma. Let's do a PNPM Prisma migrate dev. Let's call this account user creation, and you can see that it has just created it. So now let's go back here and run a DT again, and now you can see that we have two new tables. One is accounts and one is Prisma. All right, so we have created our first database, and our first table that we'll be using to populate data inside of it. All right, so that's all that we need for this project to be working. So just a small recap: we have ts config, we have Prisma configuration here. This is some errors that we are getting from import and export. I think this one we can actually solve this. If I'm not mistaken, I think this is also yes next. Let me check. Okay, and now it's requiring .config types.node. I think there's like an extra configuration that we can add here. Let me check my ts config. Oh yeah, so we can have this as preserve, and this is as yes next. Okay. We can also, I see what's the issue now. This is basically, it's complaining that we are not checking. So what we can do here is just add this process here. I think we're gonna cover this in the next class because I had to redo this one. So we have the process here, and I also think that we need to install .env for this one. Yes, yeah. So we're probably gonna do this in a minute, but just to show you how we're gonna fix this, so you can be also pretty cool about this one. Okay, so just to finish that up, web database, we're using process. Let me see if there is something else near. Oh yeah, here in types, let's also add node in here as well. Okay. Now just data source is complaining because we are not using the database URL in here. Okay, all set. But I think we're gonna see that in the next video. But yeah, just to show you a small recap, we have a few dependencies that were just installed. We have our .env with our new created database, our index which is empty, and we'll be working on that in a minute. And here our small account table with just those few properties. That's all we need for this class. Okay, I hope that you like it, and I see you in the next one. Okay, so we are back into the code, and now let's actually start implementing and creating our application. And just to be honest with you, we will be trying to create this project with a certain kind of clean architecture. So we will try to follow solid, so that this project can move along looking good, looking as a professional and really enterprise Node.js project. Okay, so for this project we will have two main folders. Okay, so we'll have the application folder, which is where we will store and add logic for our use cases, controllers, error handling, and everything. And we will have another folder named server. Okay, the server folder is where we will be having our routes. It's where we will be working with Fastify, so that application can be agnostic. Okay, so it has no connection to Fastify. So if you want, for some reason, changes to Express or to any other type of framework, it's pretty simple, pretty easy. It will always stays in one file. Okay, so now coming back here to application. Here in application, we will be creating another folder named use cases. Okay, so use cases is where we'll store the logic of our application, and in logic I mean really where we will perform things. So the first one that we'll be creating, it is the sign up, right? Because in order for us to register or to create a user, you first need to do your sign up, so then later you can do the signing. Okay, and the sign up, I'll be calling this just sign up use case .ts. Okay, so the sign up use case will not have connection to the route itself. So one of the principles of Solid is the single responsibility principle. And that's the goal for the use case, is to keep that logic or to keep that responsibility unique to the sign up use case. It's not going to handle too much thing. All right. So what I do like to have, I'm going to create a new class, name it sign up use case. And that sign up use case will only have one method, which is the execute. So we'll have an execute method, which we'll be calling, and that execute method will be creating our user, okay? So the first thing that we need is receiving the data, right? So we'll be receiving here in execute the email, the name, and the password. I would not, it's a good practice to handle the ID here inside the execute. But for this project right now, since we have here in Prisma, we are handling the generation of the ID here inside the account. I'm not gonna be modeling or changing the ID here in this part. Okay, that's debatable. We can talk about this, but I'm just gonna leave the ID to be created here by Postgres. All right. So the first thing that we need to do is type this. So type what we'll be receiving here in execute. And I do like to create an interface. I will call this interface of input, like this. And the input will have the name, which is of course a string, email, which is also a string, and we'll have the password, which is also a string, okay? And we'll be passing this to here. And of course, we can destructure this so that we can take each value separately, okay? So we have the email, the name, the password, and I always like to type the return type. Since we're not returning anything from the sign up, the only thing that I'll be doing is just for the sake of TypeScript and typing, I'll be also having like it can be an interface or just a simple input. Just gonna type this output or just output, whatever, and this is gonna return void, okay? Output, okay, and that's what we'll be returning. So the first thing that we need to check here is to see if we have or we don't have the email already registered. So that's the first thing that we need to do, is actually checking if we have that or not. And in order to do that, we need to access our database. So I have here, I was looking into that in more details, and we need to install a Prisma client in order to perform this super cool thing that Prisma has, which is being able to, in a fully typed way, connect and tailor to our schema. Okay, so the first thing that you need to do is go to your schema.prisma. So I'm gonna do that right now. I'm just gonna go to schema.prisma, and I'm gonna change this to src generated Prisma to only go and do this into generated, just as we have in here. So just dot generated, okay? The other thing that we need to do as well is that we need to install Prisma client, all right? So let's just do pnpm add or pnpm install, whatever you want, Prisma client. Let's just hit no, okay? We have here instructions, yeah. Okay. Okay, we also need that Prisma adapter PG, since we are using Postgres as well, if I'm not mistaken. PG, and let's just hit, and that's yeah, just let's just hit now. Okay, so we installed those two dependencies, and now what we need to do is generate the client API. So let's just also run this dlx Prisma generate, okay? Okay, so that will actually create that generated folder, as we can see here, and that's what we'll be using in order to connect to this. So all that you need to do is all you gotta do, you gotta connect to that Prisma client, okay? But we don't want to have the connections of Prisma on each use case, of course not. So what we'll be doing is inside application, we can come here to application, and we can create a folder named libs, and here we can create Prisma client.ts, okay? And we actually have in here, let me see, yeah, we actually have the Postgres adapter connection. So let's just copy this, come over here, let's remove this, and let this, no, not this one, not this one. We need to import the one that it's in here. Yeah, exactly. We need to import this one. Okay. I don't like that JS at the end, and I know that if I come here and change this to let me preserve, and then here to bundle, I guess. I know we can make, it's not bundle. Let me check. Bundler maybe. Yes, next. I think it's yes, next. I don't remember exactly, but there's a way to remove this .js at the end. I think just by doing that, it already solves. Yeah, okay. Let's just leave like this. I don't think that's gonna break, but if it does break, we can check later, all right? So that's all we need. And now, in order for us to actually perform anything, as you can see, we are exporting Prisma inside here. So all that we need to do is use that Prisma in here and check if we have that user created or not. Okay. So all I'm gonna do is create a const, name it account already exists. That account already exists. We use Prisma from our Prisma client. And here we can see that we already have the account table, okay? So then we can do account, and then we can just run a find unique. Since that's gonna be a unique email, and all we need to do is do a query. So where email is equal to email, or yeah, I think that's it. But remember that this is a promise, all right? So we need to have an await inside here, and in order to have an await here, this needs to be a sync. And since this is a sync, we need to add a promise here. So that will return a promise, all right? So once we do that, we need to check one thing, like if that account already exists, then we should throw an error. But since we discussed it before that this is completely separated to Fastify or Express, we cannot just do like a return response, I don't know, something, and say like return an error in here. No, we cannot do that because we're not gonna do that. And we can also not just throw a generic error, because it's be hard later on to check what this error actually really means, so that we can map later on the future. So what I will be doing right now is actually creating another folder. This time I will call this folder errors, and I will call this account already exists .ts inside errors, okay? And all this is gonna do, this is just gonna do a simple class, export class, and let's just use the same name. I think I misspelled here already. No, I think that's all right. And this will already exist. This will indeed extend the errors that we have here. And all that we're gonna do is just set a name, and this name will be account already exists, so that we can map this later and actually do a better check than just checking by the text, you know? So let's just do in here, instead of doing that, what we can do is throw new application account already exists, passing absolutely nothing because we already have the name in here, okay? So that's just a better way to handle this, and that's part of working with clean code and separating things, okay? So the only thing that is rest for us is basically just doing a Prisma dot account dot create, and in here we'll have data, and inside data, all that we need to do is pass email, password, and name, right? Of course not. We cannot. We can't just pass the user password as it is and save this in Prisma, and you probably already know that. So what we'll be doing is actually installing a library to help us work with that, and this is await. Okay. So I have in here. I made a few checks, and as you can see, we have a few ways in which we can encrypt this passwords, because the goal for this right now is that if our application leaks or if someone discovers our database and all our data is compromised, we don't want to just be throwing the users to hackers or anyone attacking our application. So what we need to do, I found a few things that just to be clear, like things that you shouldn't be doing. And here I have base 64 encoder. So this is really useful when we are passing like information through the headers. We also have MD5, which is pretty similar to what we use when we are encrypting things in JWT. But the problem with both of those things is that they're not secure enough. Base 64 is not really much to say. Like you just pass a string, you encode it, and you can decode it pretty easily. So it's not really a method of encryption in reality, because it's really super simple to just you can decode and encode something, and it's just super simple. Here we can see this example. I have this encoded password, for example. If I come here and do a decode, let me just refresh. I don't know why it's taking forever to load this page. Okay, in the meantime, yeah, for some reason it's not, yeah, it's a bit broken, you know. I think it's my internet. Okay, so now as you can see, we can just paste it and it will return. So of course this is not a valid way to store your password. Here we have MD5, and now it's a bit different because, right, if I do this and like generate, this will never, and I just paste this in the database, of course, instead of the password. This will never ever be able to trace and get this and map this to the password, right? But the problem with MD5 is that if I go to, for example, another page, like I have this other page in here, and I do the same thing, it will basically create the same MD5. So what this means is that if I paste an input, the results will always be the same, right? And that's actually a problem in our application, because there is a method, it's called rainbow, how can I say that? Rainbow attack, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. And it's basically rainbow table attack, which is just basically a way for us that attackers use on passwords like this. So basically they have a table and they can check if that already exists based on pre-selected amount of data, okay? So MD5, that type of cryptography, it's also not useful. So what we'll be using is bcrypt, and you probably see two types of bcrypt. We have node.bcrypt.js, and we also have bcrypt.js, okay? We'll be using bcrypt.js. I think it's written entirely, it's purely written in JavaScript, so it has no dependencies with C++, which is sometimes can be a problem. I think lambdas doesn't work with node.bcrypt.js, maybe. They are faster, obviously, compared to the one written in JavaScript. You can see that it's 30% slower, but it has some benefits around it. And one of the cool things about using bcrypt is that we can have this salt property. So we can go here and we have here the rounds. So let me just paste here the amount of my password, and here we have the rounds, which is the amount of time this will be recomputed, okay? And as you can see, the less rounds we do, the more fragile our password is. But the more rounds we do, more time it will take to actually generate the hash, okay? So let's just do this. You can see that if I do too much, it takes more time, okay? And it will always, it will also take more time when we actually verify it. You can see that it's taking forever. We'll probably break my website. Let's refresh this. You can see that it broke the website because it takes too much and needs too much processing from our servers, right? So we'll be installing bcrypt So all that we need to do, just go over to your project, and now let's just do a pnpmi breakcrypt JS. Okay, and it's pretty simple. And as you can see right now, all we need to do is we can just come in here and we can do a hashed password. Okay, and the hashed password, all we need to do right now is do an await, and we will be importing breakcrypt.js. Sorry, we will be importing hash, and you need to be sure to import hash from breakcrypt.js. Okay, and here we will pass in the password, and we will be passing the amount of rounds that we want to do. So as you can see here, let's see if we okay, it's back now. So let's just do the basic password, generate, and you can see that we can also verify the hash. So here we have, let's try here. We have the decrypted hash, okay, and we have the original text, which is our password, and we'll check. Now if we do something different, you can see the hash doesn't match. So that's really useful. So that's what we'll be using later on to check if the user and password, they are correct or not. Okay, so now that we have that, all that we need to do is add the amount of salted of the amount of rounds. You can leave around, I do like to keep it around 8 and 12, so let's just keep this at 10. And here in hashed password, we will save it as hashed password. Okay, so that's the first part. All right, so that's the small sign up. We made the Prisma library in here using our database URL from our env environment. We have the sign up use case, and we will be slowly implementing things. So now we will be moving straight into the controllers, which then we will be connecting with Fastify. Okay. Okay, so now let's jump straight into developing the sign-in use case, which is going to be pretty similar to what we already have in here. So the first thing that I'm going to do is just duplicate this one. So here I have a copy, and I'm going to rename this to be sign-in use case. Okay, I'm going to hit enter, and the first thing that I'm going to do is change this name to be sign-in use case. And now thinking about the signing process, we don't need name or any other new property. All we need is the email and password from the user. So I'm just gonna remove this from here and remove this from here as well. Okay, I'm gonna keep using find unique to be able to actually check and find the user's email, but I'm gonna replace this account already exists to just account, because we will need to access properties from that user account. Okay, so one thing that we can do is check, like if we don't have an account, like if that really doesn't exist, then we can create a new type of error. So here in account already exists, I'm gonna duplicate this one, and this one I'm gonna be calling this invalid credentials, okay? Because the user has passed an email that really doesn't belong to anybody, or it's not created in our database. So invalid credentials, okay? Just gonna hit enter, gonna hit enter here. And here invalid credentials, just gonna replace both of those, should be invalid credentials, okay. I misspelled that. Okay, let's just change the name, invalid credentials. All right, so what we're gonna do is that if we don't find any account, we will be calling the invalid credentials error. Okay, but now we are not gonna be going to check if that's a hashed password or anything like that. So one of the things that we can do is use the JSON Web Token to library in order to create our access token. And speaking of which, we're not gonna have just this type input. We're actually gonna change this a little bit. So this is gonna change to an access token. All right. So what we can do here is we can change this to an interface just to keep the same style, and we can change this to be, we're gonna return an object with access token to be a string. All right, so now this is gonna be an access token. So instead of returning this whole thing here, all that we'll be returning is return access token, all right? We don't have any access token, so that's what we're gonna be doing right now. So what you need to do is go here into this npm package, and we'll be installing this JSON Web Token. I just want to mention to you that we'll be using this library for now, just because it's one library that you can use in Express if you're using the Express framework. But after this video, we'll be using Fastify, JWT. There's a custom Fastify plugin that we can use that will help us a lot with JWT. Okay, so we'll be installing this one later on, but it's gonna be super simple, but that's gonna be when we move to Fastify itself. All right, so the first thing that you need to do is install JSON Web Token. I have already done it, npm and also install add types JSON Web Token as well. All right, so you need to make sure that you have those two installed. So if we don't have an account here, what we need to, if we don't have an account, if we don't have an account, we're gonna throw an error. But if that account is valid, we need to check if the password is valid as well. So I'm gonna create a new const, name it is password valid, and this one we're actually gonna be using the compare from Decrypt.js. So compare takes two properties, the password and the account dot password that the user has. Okay, let me see what's happening here. Account dot password. Okay, yeah, here, my bad. All right, so if there is no account, then we're gonna throw invalid credentials. All right, so if that doesn't match, so if that's a wrong password, then all that we need to do is come here and say, like, if that is an invalid password, we're gonna throw the same error because they're both invalid. So in that case, we don't wanna have this. Now we're gonna be using the JSON Web Token. So just install it as I did, and it's gonna be super simple. All that we need to do is come here. I'm gonna define, and this is, you can see that this is a promise that returns a boolean, as you can see here. So this needs to have an awaits property here to await this to be finished. So I'm gonna create a new const, name it access token. Okay, and the access token is just gonna be the signing property from JSON Web Token. So make sure it is importing from here. And the signing is really just a function that gets two things. So we have the sub, which is the subscriber. This could be basically anything. I'm gonna name this the user ID. And the other thing that we need, and we can actually check here, JSON Web Token. Let me go here. We can see that we have multiple things that we can pass to it, but like you can pass anything inside this practice here, this object. But one of the things that we need to pass is the private key. You can pass the algorithm that you want to use, but as I was speaking before, the JSON Web Token is just this JSON, which breaks down into those properties when decoded. All right, so we have the signature, which is the JWT secret. We have the issue date, which is the date it was created, but we can have like an expired date. And sub is just the user ID or any identifier that you want to use. We could use the user's email for this, but it's just a best practice to keep this as the account ID. Okay, the other thing that we need is the secret. So here we're gonna use process.env.jwt secret. I have already actually need to, okay, I already have this in here. So as you can see, I have this JWT secret. You can type whatever you want in here. You can type, but just make sure that this needs to be secure, because this is like the source of truth for all your users' authentication. So this needs to be a strong password. All right, so just type whatever you want to type, hit save. And I do like to keep things separately. So instead of just throwing this as JWT secret, you can see that it's complaining because this could be new. If we add this property at the end, we are guaranteeing to JavaScript, to TypeScript, that this is not gonna be new. It's just like a trust me, bro. But I do like to keep things separate. So I have this config folder And all that we need to do is just create a .env.ts file. Okay, and we can just export this as an object, and here we can have like JWT secret, which is just gonna be process.env.jwt secret, doing the same thing at the end. Okay, just to guarantee that things are like this. And in here, instead of getting this from there, we can just do an env and importing it from our config file JWT secret. And the other thing that we need to pass in here is something really important, which is how much time this is this signature actually valid. So we can pass like you can see here that we have the algorithm, the private key, but we have the timestamp. Okay, you can see that we can pass an expired date, and you can see that you can pass numbers, you can pass a string as 1 hour, you can even pass, I think, like 1 day or something like this, 1D. It's super customizable. All right, I'm gonna just be you can see that we have the expires in, and I'm gonna place here 1D. This means 1 day. All right, so that's basically all we need for the signing. So we have an account, we have the access token, email, password, and that's it. Now, what we're gonna be doing right now is creating the controller so that we can actually be able to call those things, and then eventually we're gonna create our routes using Fastify, okay? Okay, so it's finally time for our controllers. And the controllers are pretty interesting because they are gonna be able to orchestrate, or in other words, they're gonna be able to validate what the client is passing to us. And is the controller is what is actually gonna be saying if we should pass this to sign-in use case, sign-up use case, what we need to be able to execute that request. Okay, so here inside applications, I'm gonna create a new folder, name it controllers. All right. And the first controller that we'll be creating is the sign-up controller. So let's just go in here and create the sign-up controller.ts. Okay, this is just gonna be a simple class, sign-up controller, and that's it. But one of the things that I do like to work, especially when we are not using any type of framework to create this, is create a typed way to create controllers. All right, so one of the things that we can do is that we can create a contract. All right, so we can do something like this. We can just go in here, and here in application, I like to create a folder, name it interfaces, and here we're gonna have the interface for the controller, so the iController.ts. Okay, so the iController.ts is gonna export an interface, name it iController. And the iController needs to be able to handle the requests or handle our application flow. So we're gonna create a handle property in here. And this handle property, this is just gonna be a simple way to say, like, we're gonna have a request and we're gonna have a reply. All right, so in order to do that, we can just type and export 2 new interfaces. So we're gonna have the interface of the request and the interface of the reply. So we can go here and create a request. And remember that we're gonna be requesting and we're gonna be replying to or responding to what we need. So one thing that will be coming from the user is the body. So the body is just a record, which is an object with a key, which is always a string, and any, which can be anything like a number or anything like that. Of course, we could keep more things. We could create like the headers, query params, and so on. But let's just keep things simple. Let's just keep with the body here, okay? Then we can evolve this to more complex things. Then, besides the request, we're also gonna need the response, because we need to deliver that to the user. So we're gonna have the response. Gonna call this the response, and the response will also can contain a body. We could pass this. Like if for example we create a new user and I want to return the credentials, we want to return the access token. So we must be able to return that by a body, but that can also be null. So that's really kind of optional to pass anything inside the body. But one thing is for sure, we need to send the status code, which is going to be always a number. All right. So basically what we can do this is here, we can take the body. That's what we're going to be passing here. And for this one, we're going to be returning response. So that is the contract. So we're basically saying that all our controllers will need to follow this contract. We need to follow this interface. And how do we do that? We do that by using the implements property here and calling the I controller. All right. And you can see that it's already telling us that we need to have the handle property here. Okay. So let's call the handle. You can see that it already imported and using multiple things in here. But the user cannot pass anything to us and we just gonna call the sign in or the sign up use case. We need to validate and actually check that. So one of the things that we can use, and that's what we'll be using today, is the ZOD framework. So the ZOD framework is just a basic super simple library that allows us to check the user, what the user is passing, and to check the schema of things. Okay, so let's just install it. We can just type pnpm ZOD. This needs to be a production type of, I think it's a production type of library. And now that we have this, all that we need to do is validate what we have. Okay, so here we can start from here at the top and we create our schema. Of course, we can move this to a separate file. We're gonna go into more details about solid and dependency injection in just a second, but let's just keep things simple. Just gonna import Z from ZOD, and here we're gonna create an object. And what do we need? We need the name. The name is gonna be a Z dot string with the minimum length of 1. Okay, we also need an email, which is going to be also a string with the length of 1, but we also have the property is email. You can see that email is no longer valid. Let me check here. ZOD email validation. I don't really remember this one. Let me check. Okay, yeah, we actually need to pass this first. So let's just pass here z.email, and we can also pass a string with size of 1, and actually it's main length. Okay, so here you can see that we have like a z.string, and let's go here into basic usage, and you can see that we have this dot main property. Of course, that is why it was complaining to us. We can actually do z.string or just more simple than that, email with a main of 1. Okay, and the other thing that we need to do is pass the password, which is going to be a z.string as well, but this time the minimum that we expect is 8 characters long. All right, so that's the schema. So that is what the user needs to pass to us in order for this to be working. All right, so the first thing that we need to do is take from this body the properties that we need. So all we need to do is come here and we're gonna create a const, and we're gonna use a schema dot parse. Okay, and actually pass this schema. So the parse property is gonna parse this and check if what the user is passing to us is valid or not. But this is gonna throw us an error. So if this throws us an error, we have two options. We can wrap this up into a try catch, or we can use the safe parse. All right. With the safe parse, this is not gonna throw an error, but we can like create a result. And if there is any results, then we can throw things. But I do like the try-catch approach quite a lot. So let's just create a try-catch here. And instead of safe parse, let's actually do a parse. And it's nice that schema actually returns to us all those properties that we are passing to schema that are valid. So we have the name, have the email, and we have the password all inside here, okay? Now, once that we have this in here, now that we have this all set, we need to actually be able to call the sign-in use case or the sign-up use case and actually pass those information. So I'm gonna just create a just gonna be able to create like a sign-up use case, and I'm gonna initiate the sign-up use case, okay? Now, the only thing that we need to do, it's pretty simple. We can just come in here and let's just await sign up use case dot execute, and all that we need to do is pass the name, the email, and the password of the user, and this is a sync function, okay? Now, once we do that, all that we need to do by the end is return. I'm gonna return a 204. So here we have the status code, which is gonna be a 204 with no content, and the body is gonna be null. So that's all that we need in order to this to be working, okay? I think there's something, we have the sign up use case, we have the execute, and here we have the error handling. And remember that here in sign up use case, we are, let me check, throwing this account already exists, which is basically the only type of error that we can have. So all I'm gonna do right now is check for two things. So if error is an instance of Zod error, okay? So if this actually throws an error, this is gonna fall right inside here. All I'm gonna do is return a status code with an error 400 of error, and here in the body I'm just gonna be returning error dot issues. All right, issues, as you can see, is just a Zod property with the issues that we have faced. Now, if what we get here is something different, like an instance of, we can actually get this from here. Let me go sign up use case, account already exists. If that's the issue, then all that we need to do is return a different type of error. I think we can return 400 if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, we can return the 409 here, which means it is, yeah, as I was just searching right now, and if you go like 409 HTTP status, we can see that this is like a conflict, so we have a conflict here. But if you just send 400, it's also fine. It's just a matter of semantics, okay? And here the body, we can just pass like an error, and the error can be like sign up controller. We can just pass invalid user, or this user already exists, or just something simple like this. Let's just go and check. User already exists. Try a new one. But if that doesn't happen, then we can just throw error and pass that forward to the next request, okay? So that's the sign up, super simple. And here we are not using body, we need to use the body in here to actually be able to return that. So that's our sign up, super simple. And that's basically it. Now we're gonna do the same thing, but now for the signing use case. And before we go into that, one of the things that I wanna mention to you is that here in the sign up use case, we can see that we have this salt, which is the amount of times this is gonna rotate. So we are passing like straightforward number in here, as you can see, but this can be an issue, all right? What if we need to pass like an entire repository or an entire thing into this? This cannot happen. So one of the ways that we can do this is using something called dependency injection, all right? Which is a pattern when we receive objects as dependencies and then we resolve that. So this is a really interesting case. So for the sign up controller, instead, let's just do an example here. Let's go back into sign up use case, and this we can actually create a private read only like south. Okay, and here in the constructor, we need to be passing here the south property, which is just a number. Okay, and we can set this south to be equal to south of what we receive. That's a way of doing this, but another way, which is way simpler, is just setting this and TypeScript will private read only south. And all that we need to do here is just call this dot south. Okay, private read only south number. Yeah, here we go. So now sign up use case needs has a dependence. It needs that whoever's calls sign up use case to pass this south number. Okay, so here now you can see that it's complaining. So we can pass just a 10 here, but that's not what we want. What we actually want is make this also a dependency injection. So when we call sign up controller, we want to be able to pass everything sign up controller needs for it to be working. So I'm gonna do something pretty similar. I'm gonna create a constructor, but this time constructor we actually need to be passed the sign up use case to it. Okay, so let's pass the sign up use case, and it is a sign up use case type. Okay, so now instead of initiating sign up use case here, we're gonna just do a des dot sign up use case. Okay, let's just clean this. I forgot actually all we need to do is the des dot sign up use case. So now the controller doesn't really need what sign up use case actually is needing for it to work. So for example, if I come back here to sign up use case and actually ask for another thing like private read only, I don't know, now we want a name to be passed when we initiate this class. So as a string, you can see that sign up controller is not complaining because all of that information will be passed when we first initiate this this class. Okay, so let's just go back here to sign up use case, clean this because we're just gonna keep this out, and let's go back, try controllers, sign up controllers. All right, so now all we need to do is do the same thing, but this time for the signing controller. So let's just duplicate this and let's call this signing controller. Okay, let's just hit enter. I'm gonna call this signing controller, and we're gonna do something pretty similar. All right, so here in signing controller, we're gonna have something way simple. Now here, what we need to be injected should this be work is the signing use case. So let's just rename this to signing use case. We don't need a name anymore. All we need is that, and we can claim the email as well. Let's just call the signing use case, pass the email, but this time the signing use case actually returns to us a access token. Okay, so here we're gonna change a little bit because this is gonna be a 200 created, and we're gonna actually be able to pass the access token to it. So we're passing the email and password to Zod. Zod is gonna validate and check if that is valid or not. If it's not valid, we're gonna throw this in here. Otherwise, here in signing use case, we can see that we have a different type of error. We have invalid credentials. Now that's what we're gonna do. So here in signing controller, we're also gonna check if that error is an instance of invalid credentials. Then we're gonna throw a 409 invalid credentials account already exists. Let me check. Here in sign up use case, we are using account already exists. Okay, in sign up use case. In signing use case, we are using invalid credentials. All right. So here in controllers, in the signing, in invalid credentials, this is actually going to be a 401, which is unauthorized, and we can just paste something like invalid credentials and let the user work with that. Okay. So with that in mind, now we have both the sign up and the sign in controller, which they are both calling which they're both calling their use case, and we are using dependency injection to create and initiate this entire application. Okay, and we are already handling the errors as you can see in here. Now let's just move straight into creating our server using Fastify. Okay, it's finally time to use Fastify in order to create our server and create our first routes. So the first thing that we'll be doing right now, I just want to make sure that you have Fastify installed. So for example, if you should have been done this before, but just make sure that Fastify is installed so that we can use that. If you want to work with Express, that's fine. So far what we've done, we are not dependent on Fastify or anything. It's just that by the end of this video, I'll be using Fastify to use and to control our JWT creation of tokens, okay? So the first thing that I will be doing right now is that, as you can see here on the source folder, we have this index.ts, and if we go here to packet.json, we're basically calling this index.ts. So the first thing that I'll be doing is creating another index.ts, but this time inside server, and that's where we will be initiating our Fastify server. So in order to access that, all that I'll be doing in this file is importing this server file, which we're gonna be automatically directing to index.ts, okay? So what I'll be doing right now is just importing a Fastify. So I'll be importing Fastify like this from Fastify, and I'm not sure why it's not linking, but we can check that later. And it's super easy to initiate or to start our application. So first thing that we'll be doing is I would like to name this as app. You can name this whatever you want. And all that this is gonna do is just call Fastify, all right? Super simple. And in order to start our server, all we need to do is do a app.listen. I'm gonna call the port for this one 3000. You can also pass the host as well. I usually type 0.0.0, so that's just our local host. And that's basically it. Now this is a promise. So if you wanna add like a message or something, let's just do a .then, and here we can add a console.log and just type something like server is running. If you want to do things even better, you can do like this, like creating a variable for our port, so like something like const port equals to 3000. We name it here, and server is running on HTTP localhost, and now we use the name here for the port. Okay, I already know why linting is not being applied. I've removed a few things, but we can work on that later on. The matter for now is really the code. You could also do a try catch. I have here an example. So you can do basically like a try catch if you don't like this, but since it's super simple, I don't think there is any need for using try catch, but this is another approach. Since that is just a promise, you can also use async await, which is more modern and simpler to understand as well. Now, if we come here right now and just hit a npm run dev, as you see, you can see that now server is running on localhost 3000. And since this is just a get method, I can just move straight to here and like hit, and as you can see, route get was not found because there's nothing in here, okay? There's no other routes. So let's just go and start developing this. Let me just open my VS Code. And the first thing that we need to do right now is just create our routes, okay? Now, I'll be moving those routes to another file in a minute. I just want to keep everything together so that we feel the need to move this to another file. So if you're anxious on seeing me doing everything on the same file, just keep calm. I'll be connecting it in a minute. So let's just do an app dot post. Remember, we'll be posting. In other words, we're not getting anything. We are sending information to the server. So we need to use the post method here. And the first argument that this requires is our path, is our route name. So let's do the signing, okay? And the signing is basically a function. We can name this like it's an async function. We can name this async function handler, okay? And this handler function, as you can see, we can also add a request, and here we have a reply, both from Fastify, okay? And if you want, let's just try something, like we can just do a return, something like hello word, like this. So now if we open this and we come back here, and instead of localhost 3000 we pass a signing, you can see that now we have hello world, okay? But as I mentioned, we are not using a simple get method. You're using the post method in here, all right? So let's just duplicate this. We have the signing and we have the sign up, all right? Now, this is not linting, this is annoying me, but I'll work on that after this video. So the first thing that we need to do is actually get the requests and the reply from here. The reply is just what we're going to be sending to the user. The request is what we have in here. So let's start with the sign up. Okay. So what we need in order for this to work, we need both the controller and the use case. So let's call the first one sign up controller, which is equal to new sign up controller. Okay. But remember that sign up controller requires sign up use case, as you can see here. So let's also import sign up use case equals new sign up use case and pass this to here. You can see that now sign up controller has no errors anymore, but sign up use case now requires one argument, which is the salt. So we can actually call this salt like this and pass it to here. Now, if we go back here, I think I forgot to remove something. Let's just go back to controllers, sign up controller. Yes. Okay. No, we are fine. We are fine. Okay. So now back to our route. Now that we have those configurations, and just keep in mind that we'll be fixing that in a minute. Okay. What we need to do now is actually call this passing our request, what we are getting from the request.body. Okay. So let's just do right now and await. Okay. We can actually, since we are calling signup controller, remember that we use iController, and iController will return for us the status code and the body. So we also want to pass that status code and body to the client. So all we need to do is do an await, since this is an async promise, and call the signup controller dot handle. And what the dot handle requires for us, it requires a body. Okay, so all that we need to do is pass this as a body, passing the requests dot body. All right, you can see that it is getting us an error because of the type. So in order to fix this pretty quickly, let's just pass this as record any end type string. Okay, I will fix the links in a minute. Let's just pause for a second. Let me just enable links back again. Okay, I'm back again. So just for you to let you know, I was trying this new extension named Biome. So this biome.js, but I'm not using it right now because we're using Prettier and ESLint, but it's definitely worth checking. Okay. So what I did basically was just getting Prettier back again, just so that we keep things simpler. Okay. So now it's formatted, and as we know, this signup controller returns for us a status code and also a body. Okay. And now what we need to do is just basically return this to the user. All right. So here, what we can do is use this reply method. So we can use the reply dot status code and actually send the status code. And here we can also pass, do a send, which will pass our body. Okay, it's getting an error here. Status code is a number. Oh yeah, my bad. It's status. It's just status code. Okay. So yeah, reply.status, passing the status code. And now in order for us to do the signing, that's also pretty simple. All we need to do, I'm just gonna copy this because we're just gonna change the name. So now this is the signing use case. We can remove the salt from here. And this is the signing controller, all right? And this is the signing use case and the signing controller. So all we need to do is pass this in here, and now we'll be calling signing controller from the handle itself. Okay, so now we have our signing and also our sign up. So all that we need to do right now is check to see if is working or not. So let me just hit the npm run dev because I had to restart the whole thing. Okay, we have an error here. I think I know what is the problem. We have signing. Let me check. I think what we need to do here is we need to import. Let me check again. I think if you do something like this, like if we import JWT and do a JWT dot signing, I think that's how it works. Let me check again. Let me stop and try to run it. Okay, I think this is probably gonna work now. But just a reminder that we're not gonna use JSON Web Token. In a few minutes, I'll be changing all of that to use Fastify plugin. Okay, so but now it's working, right? I have this application named Bruno, but you can also use Insomnia, whatever you want to use. And I also have in here the signing and the sign up. I was doing some testing, but for the sign up, all that you need to do is create a JSON and a body. We have the name. I'm just gonna paste my name. We need to pass the email, and now it's also worth doing a few testing cases, right? So if I just hit send, refuse it to connect. Let me check again. Sometimes, okay, we are on 3000, not on 3001. Let's change this to 3000. Okay, you can see now Zod is returning for us a few error messages. So we have an invalid email, so expected string, received undefined, and also we get the same error for password. If we remove the name as well, we can say that we have the same errors for each field. Now let's get all of that up again. I'm gonna type like random email. For the password, we can also type, let me just pass password. And here we can do something random like this. And let's just reduce a little bit. Let's just do like this. So you can see that we are getting an error now because of the password. Now, if the password is long enough, but the email is wrong, let's check. You can see that we have an invalid email address. Perfect. So let's just add a .conf at the end and do a send. Client password must be string. That's interesting. We're getting 500 error. Sorry, client password is a string. So this is a sign up controller, okay? And this is not a Zod error, right? Otherwise we will be falling inside here. So that's not the case. What we can do, let's just do like a console.log here. Console.log error sign up. You can paste the error. Okay, let's check what we can see in here. Okay, so it's a error from Prisma. Client password must be string. Let's check our schema. So password is a string. Interesting. Let me see. Okay, so I found out the reason why we're getting that error. So that is a .env error. So basically Prisma is not being able to access our .env. So here we have two options. We can either do something like this. I think it's just that. Or one of the ways that I think it's more useful, especially now that we are working in dev environment, I do like to just add one property that it's kind of new, but if you're on Node.js 20 or something newer, you can just paste the env file and inject it in here. So you can just do something like this, .env. Okay, if you do that, I think that's all we need. I'm just gonna restart it. and we come back here and we do a send. You can see that now we have it returning a 204, no content, and as you can see, there is nothing in here. And one of the ways for us to see something is going and doing a pnpm Prisma Studio so that we can actually check and see everything inside here. So here we have accounts. We have 2 accounts because I was testing this before, but we can see that we have our new one here, and you can see that our password is hashed and there's no way for us to actually see what is really the user's password. Okay, so now that we have everything set up for the sign up, let's do the signing. Let me go back here, and here in signing, I'm just gonna copy this, paste, remove the name. And here I'm gonna type a wrong password. I'm just gonna remove like half of it. Do a send. Okay, this was also wrong. Do a send. You can see that we have invalid credentials. Now, if this is correct, we can also do a send. And now we have the access token, which is what we need to send to the front end. Okay. Now, something that I forgot is like when we have a 204, when this was successful, and we send it again, okay, user already accessed, so we have that valid verification, so we are not saving the user twice, okay? So that's basically it for now. We have created our our routes, and let's make this even better, okay? See you in the next one. All right, so now that we are back, before we create our first protected route, I wanna tell you that this is really not looking good, right? I know you have probably noticed, but this is going to be extremely complex once our application starts to grow. You can see that we have signing use case, signing controller. Here we have the salt that is being passed to sign up use case, and that's being passed forward. So that is getting bigger and bigger. And you are probably not seeing how big of a deal this is because this is pretty small. But let's suppose our application grows and for some reason, like we want to now have use the repository pattern and inject inside the sign up use case, our database, or for some reason we want to use here in sign up use case instead of getting here, let me get sign up here in signing use case, instead of getting the .env file, we want to actually get from the constructor that JWT secret. So if that happens, our index.ts, this post method will get extremely big and confusing. So there's a few things that we can do. One of those things is using a pattern, name it the factory pattern. We can actually search here, factory pattern, can type like JavaScript to see a few examples. And basically what a factory pattern does is that we gonna encapsulate a lot of our logic inside one function, and that function will return for us that what that factory has produced. So a code that we can execute and that it's being handled by their side. Okay, you can check that later and actually search a little bit more about the factory pattern, but we're gonna build one, and you're gonna see that there are levels of complexity when it comes to the factory pattern, but we're gonna keep pretty simple. So here in the source folder, I'm gonna create a new file, this one, name it factory. And one of the ways that I like to name factories is starting with the word make. So make something, please make me a sign up use case. And that's what we're gonna do. So let's do a make sign up use case, for example. Factory, I think it's factories. Yeah, factories, yeah. In plural, because we're gonna have multiple factories, okay? So make sign up use case is gonna be super simple. It's just a function that it's named make sign up use case, and make sign up use case is just gonna return for us a new sign up use case. Okay, that's pretty much it. And sign up use case expects the salt. So let's do a salt equal to 10 and pass that to here. Now we're gonna do this for all of our functions. So we're gonna have also a sign up controller. So let's do a sign up controller.ts. The difference is now, let's just remove this controller. Let's import this. But the difference now is that we don't need the sign up controller. We actually need the sign up use case. So let's do account sign up use case equals to make sign up use case. Okay, and we're gonna be passing this inside here. So those are our factories. Now let's do the same thing for the signing. Let's just duplicate this and change to signing use case. Let's hit enter, paste it here, make signing use case, remove the salt, we don't need that, and import signing use case, and that's it. Now let's do the same for the controller. I'm gonna change this to make signing controller and rename it here. And now we're gonna request for make signing use case, and here is signing controller, passing this inside here. Okay, now that we have our factories, what we need to do is come back here and let's just clean this up a little bit. So instead of doing all of this, all that we're gonna do right now is just make a new signing controller. You can see there are no errors anymore. And we're gonna do the same thing for this one. So let's do make sign up controller. And that's it. Now, for some reason, let's suppose, for example, here in make signing use case, now we're gonna have, for example, that new property, private read only JWT secret, which is a string. Let's suppose we have this now. You can see that the only file that is requesting that is the make signing. So what we would be doing in that situation, we can just do like a JWT secret, paste something, and then you can see that the error is no longer happening. So that is really useful, especially when our application starts to grow and we need to inject more things into that. Of course, there is level of factories, but that's a good one for us to start working with. I'm gonna remove that since we're not using this for no reason, okay? But there's another thing that we need to do. And that thing that we need to do is actually reduce this amount of code. As you can see, there's a lot in here. We have this async function handler, request reply, and so on. But it's not really a good practice to keep everything inside here. And what if, for example, let me go back here to sign up controller. You can see that we have an I controller here. Let's suppose that right now we're gonna need the headers, okay? The headers are record, string. What happens now? What happens now is that we will need to change in all of our files and add the headers and eventually add the params, query params, and so on. And we don't want to be needing to change that on multiple files. So what we can do is pretty much this. We can just comment this right now. And we're gonna create a new file. This time I'm gonna create here inside server. I'm gonna create a new folder named adapters, okay? And inside adapters, I'm gonna create a new one named route adapter.ts, okay? Again, adapters, okay, here we go. Now, the route adapters, they look pretty much as a factory, but they are higher order functions. In other words, there are functions that are returning another function, and they also use the currying method. If we go here and search for currying in JavaScript, basically it is a pattern that we can use here we go. So here we have a regular versus a created function. You can see like a normal function just takes 2 arguments, return the result. Now the current function is a nested single argument function. So we receive like a property and we're gonna return a new function from that. You can search that later on, but it's just basically what we'll be doing is creating a new function. Name it route adapter, okay? And where we're gonna use this route adapter. This route adapter will replace all this code. So what we'll be doing is, for example, creating a app.post for signing. And now we're just gonna be calling route adapter, and inside route adapter, we'll be passing this factory for the controller. So that's what we want. But this needs to be adjustable. This needs to be flexible. So what can we do now? We're gonna come back here to route adapter, and here we're gonna pass a controller to that. So let's just pass the controller, and as we have just seen, we know how the controller looks like because we have an interface here. This tells us how our controller will look like. So let's just go back here to iController, to route adapter, and let's import this to be iController, okay? So what we're gonna do right now, we're gonna just return a new function. So let's just do return, okay? And what this function will receive. So this function, as we saw here, we need the request and the reply that comes from Fastify. So what we can do here is that we can have like a request, and this is a Fastify request type, and we will have the reply, which is a Fastify reply method, okay? And this is gonna be a sync function. So what we're gonna do right now, basically we're gonna do exactly what we do inside here. We're gonna reply this, and we're gonna send the controller that we are receiving as params inside here, So let's just paste this. Let's come back here to controller. So instead of using signing controller, all we need to do is return the controller inside here. Now, if for some reason, let's suppose we have now here an iController, let's go with headers. Let's go again, for example, with params. All that we need to do is change this inside here. So we can actually make this even better. We can change the type here. So let's go with, for example, body. We can type the body to be a record, string, and any. Let me remove. Okay, yeah, I think I know what I'm missing. Yeah, and any. Okay, so now we are typing body. Let's do the same thing for headers. Now headers are gonna be just a record of string and string. And let's also type our custom type, because for some reason it's not getting that, but we can just go here and do a record here in params. And now all we need to do is go here and take the headers as request.headers and params as request.params, okay? We're getting an error here, lowercase strings not assignable. Yeah, let's just keep this as any, because we saw that for me headers are just like an object with string and type, but that's just for now, just so us that was just to see that we can pass like custom things and add more things here to our handler so that it's more customizable. So all that we need to do right now, we can actually remove all of that, and we can actually remove all of this as well. So all we need to do now is use our route adapter and make a sign up controller call passing that. And you can see that there are no errors showing. We can clean a lot of code up here. And now just to double check, we can come back here, do a sign up. Let's do another email, and let's type anything here in password and do a send. We can see that we have a 204. Now if we go back here to signing and try to login, we have a valid access token. Okay, so that's great. Let's just clean everything that we have, because it's a lot of changes that we've done, and it's starting to get a bit messy. So git commit fit controllers, routes, and factories. Okay, so that's it. Let's now work on our protected routes. So what happens when we need to have protected routes, when we need to only access resources when they are private? So let's suppose you've done your sign up, now you're signing, and let's suppose this is an application that returns for us, for example, leads. So you have potential clients, they have filled up the form and you need to contact them. So that is probably gonna be based on your company. So let's suppose this is an application that really works for each individual company. You have your signing and sign up, and you found out new customers. Okay, so let's build this and let's do step by step. All right. So the first thing that we need to do is adding a new route, but this is not gonna be a post route. This is gonna be a get route because we're getting all those new leads. Okay, so I'm just gonna call this leads like this, and we need to have the same exact type of structure here. We need to have a make list leads controller. So the first thing that I'll be doing is creating a new controller. This one will be called list, because we're listing, we're getting all the leads. List leads controller.ts. Okay, I'm gonna hit enter. I'm gonna export a class, which is a list leads controller that implements a controller, the same one as we did before. And this also needs, this will gonna be in a sync handle function, all right? That's all good, but let's make this just for the purpose of teaching and for the class. The only thing that I'll be doing is returning a status code 200, a body with a, I don't know, leads array, with 2 users. So let's go with ID. This one would be, I don't know, 1, 2, 3. Let's go one by one, right? So now we have a name. This one would be, I don't know, Matthew. All right. Now let's add 2 more just so that we have more data. So this is just market data, just market information. Let's call this Alexandra, like this, and let's call this one John, just to keep things simple. All right, so now with that we have this, we need to create our factory, because let's suppose eventually we will have like a repository or more information, so let's just keep the same style. So let's just create a make lists leads controller.ts. okay, and this is just going to return for us a function, export function, and this is just going to return a new instance of list leads controller. Okay, that's all we need, and that's exactly what we're going to use here. So here we have a get, and if we go here and call this make list leads controller, we have our route, we have our get route. That's great. So let's go over back to Bruno here. I have already created this one. Let's hit send, and we can see that we have our array of leads. Let me just change this to a 3 here. Here we go. Okay, but as you can see, I'm hitting this, and there's no check to see if I'm logging in or not. I could have done logging or not, doesn't really matter. So what we'll be using to check if this user is authenticated is when the client makes us a request, the client will need to send in its headers a property named bear token. Okay, so bear, and then we will paste here the token. There's a better way to do this, especially like Insomnia, Bruno. You can go here to auth, and you can see that we have a bear token auth. So we'll be using this token to actually check that. And what we'll be pasting in here, the access token, of course. So I'll be doing a signing. You can see that every time I do a signing, of course, the token will change. I'm gonna back here to leads. I'm gonna paste this back again, and you can see that even pasting, of course, there's no logic, so this is just gonna keep returning 200, and all of that is fine. Now, in Fastify, we can actually use our middlewares. There's no such thing as middlewares in Fastify when we think like on Express. So Express, we can add something inside here, which is definitely a middleware, and we have the next property, which is gonna send to the next middleware or to the route itself to the controller. Here in Fastify, we have other types of properties that can happen before actually working inside the controller. So for this one, we have this property called pre-handler, okay? So here we have a few options. I could just do something really simple and click here in server and create something like auth middleware.ts or something like this. But what happens when our application grows? What happens when we have more middlewares besides the auth middleware? We want to have a different type of middleware. What happens in that case? So because of that, I'll be creating a middleware in the same style that we have been building so far, okay? So the first thing that I'll be doing at this moment is creating the same structure that we have for a controller. So here in controller, we see that we have a request, a body, and so on and so on. So we'll be developing the same structure to work with middlewares, all right? So the first thing that I'm gonna be doing is I'm just gonna copy and paste in this and changing this to don't forget the middleware.ts, okay? I'm gonna change the name here to a middleware, and the difference now is that our middleware will have a few different things inside of it, okay? So one of the things that I wanna work here, I just wanna use the headers for now. I just need the headers for this to work. There's no other need, because especially for this middleware, we're just gonna use the headers to get that authorization from it, okay? We kind of have the body and the status code to 200. And now what I'll be doing is creating a folder. I already have this folder named middleware, and I'm gonna instant this road this interface to work with middleware. So now we're having an auth middleware.ts, okay? So the first thing that I'll be doing is creating a class, the same thing as we do for controllers, but this time we're gonna implement an middleware, all right? And this one is basically gonna work pretty much the same way as the other. But this time we are working with headers, okay? So in order for us to actually get our JWT token, because we're gonna pass that access token into the headers. So the first thing that we need to do is actually check if that header is valid or not, okay? So basically what we can do is just go here and create a new variable. We can call this authorization, for example, and this authorization will come inside headers.authorization, all right? So that's the first thing that we need to do, is actually get that. Now inside authorization, the bear token is basically a string with a bear name into it, and here we have the token, okay? So what we can do is that we can destructure this and get the two values. So we can get, for example, bear as a variable name, bear, and token, and we can do authorization dot splits into the space, because as I told you, this is the format. It's bear and then the space and then something. So we can split that using the space as our splitter, okay? So we can check, like, if, for example, the bear is not equal to bear, okay? Since that will not be a bear token, so that's not valid. Or if there's no token, we can basically throw a new error, all right? Because in the end, we're gonna verify if that is valid or not. So the first thing that we can do here is doing a try-cat. And there are a few ways in which we can do that. The first one is that we need to get the payload, okay? So here inside authorization, one of the properties that we could use is we can create a variable named payload, and we can import JWT. So let's just do import JWT from JSON Web Token. and let's import JWT, and let's use this property, name it verify, to actually check and see if that payload is valid or if that token is valid or not. Okay, let's get the token, and let's use our env.env file to check based on the secret if that token is valid or not. Okay, and as you can see, this is gonna return for us. You can see that we have a JWT payload. All right, and I want to go inside of it, but basically this is going to return for us the payload. So you can see that returns a string or a JWT.payload. Okay, so the first thing that I want to check if that payload is valid or not, because if that payload, like if the type of the payload, if type of payload is equal to string, or there is no .sub inside the payload because we are saving it as sub, or there's no payload.sub, then we are also gonna throw a new error because this is not a not valid payload. Okay, and that actually, let me just do this inside of string. Okay, so now we are definitely having a payload.sub in here, so that we actually getting that account ID. We will use that later on. Okay, so what we can do now is just return, and you can see that we have a status code. We can pass this as 200 because it was successful, a body which is gonna be no, and here in errors we can just do a return. We can pass in here a status code to be 41, like unauthorized. We can pass a body and say like error invalid, something like invalid credentials, invalid token. And we can even pass something like, I don't know, error description or something, and pass here like the error that we get from here. Okay, so if something, if we want to have more details. Now that we have our auth middleware, what we are going to be using is that we want to call this, and we want to check if that is a valid auth middleware or not. Okay, so here in route adapter, what I want to do something really similar from route adapter, but this time for middlewares. Okay, so the first thing, another thing that we need to do, of course, is here in auth middleware we have that instance. Let's come back here and let's do the same thing for the factor. So let's just do a make auth middleware.cs, which is also gonna return a function which is an instance of middleware, which contains the user logic. Okay, now here in routes, what I want to do is that I want to actually add that logic inside here. Now remember that inside adapters is where we have some Fastify logic. So if you want to change frameworks, we only change it inside the server. All right, so one thing that I'll be creating right now is creating the middleware adapter itself. So let's name this middleware adapter.cs. Okay, middleware adapter.cs, and let's just do the same thing as we do here in the route adapter. So we're gonna have a new function, name it route adapter, but this time we're gonna pass to it a middleware to it. So we're gonna pass to it the make auth middleware to this function. So we're gonna have a middleware which is the type of I middleware. Okay, and the same thing as we do here, we're gonna return an async function. Okay, and that async function will have a reply and a request inside of it. Okay, so that's all that we need inside of this. I think I copy and paste it. Oh yeah. Okay, yeah, this is an arrow function. Okay, much better. So here we have the request and reply. We're not gonna work with the body or the head or the params. We're just gonna work with headers for now. So let's just keep things simple, okay? And we're gonna have the same type of logic that we have here in the routes, right? So, but instead of calling controller, of course, we'll be calling our middleware. We're not gonna have body or params, only the request.header. So that's gonna be passing along, okay? But now we need to check a few things here in order for this to be valid or not. Remember, we don't have any logic inside our auth middleware that says we are using Fastify or not. So all that we need to do here is check. So if the status code is different than 200, it means we got an error, okay? So in this case, we can just return this property right here. So you're gonna return the status code and the body, which actually contains the error itself. So that's basically all we need to verify, because we are calling the auth middleware in this case, and we're gonna pass it to it, okay? So let's now use it here. So what I'm gonna do right now, I'm gonna call this middleware adapter and pass to it the make auth middleware, all right? And let's just hit save and see what this does now, okay? Let's do it. Let's go back here. Let me hit save. Nothing changed. But if I remove this and hit save, we can see that now we have an internal server error. We can actually enhance this logic a little bit, because instead of throwing just an error, I don't want to throw internal server error. I want to actually throw like a valid error here. So let's throw something like, let's copy this and do a return status code invalid. Let's see. Yeah, now we have invalid token here. Okay, so let's just use this approach, which is just much better for this case. Okay, so we have here an invalid token. We could abstract this and just call it, but since it's a small code, I don't feel it's necessary. We are already doing a lot of abstractions. So you can see that now we are protecting the route. There's no way the user can access this route, and like, I mean, they can paste whatever they want here. Nothing's gonna work, all right? You can see that even invalid token, error description, we now have malformatted JSON Web Token, so we have even more data inside of here, okay? So let's do this again. Let's do a signing. Let's pass this. But now let's suppose you wanna, let's suppose you're authenticated, you're all good, but once you are here inside list leads, you wanna have access to that account ID. You wanna be able to fetch inside your database based on the user account to get out their leads, for example. There's no, like, you could be authenticated, but we're not gonna return our entire database to the user. We want to return that based on their account ID. So that is exactly what we'll be doing. We're going to get an account ID from the request, and we are going to use it in our application. So then just do a console.log here in account ID. And of course, nothing's going to happen because we are not passing or using or even typing this. So I'm going to come back here to i.request in our controller. And here I'm gonna add a new param to our request, okay? So what I'm doing right now is here inside, we have auth middleware. Here inside our controller, I'm gonna create a new property, this time name it pause. Volta. This time I'm gonna call a new property named account ID that I'm gonna pass to it, and this is gonna be an optional property, of course, because let's suppose we are in sign up. There's no way, makes no sense to send or even possible to send the account ID. So this is gonna be string or undefined. I'm gonna strictly say that this would be undefined, even though this already says it's optional, because I'm gonna send this to be undefined later on, okay? So now that we have this, we can see there's no error anymore here, but this is gonna be empty because we're not passing anything to it, okay? So the first thing that we need to do is actually here inside our body, we're gonna need to get that account ID from here, but we don't have any account ID inside our headers. So let's go back here to middleware, middleware, and here in the response, we are also gonna be sending that account ID. So let's pass account ID here. This is gonna be string or undefined, okay? And now here inside middleware, we're gonna get this account ID. Now, since the account ID, pausa de novo. Voltou. Now, the account ID that we have here is just gonna be a little bit different, okay? Because here in route adapter, that's where I am feeling a bit mistaken here. Because in here, we're gonna get the account ID from inside of it, okay? And we're gonna check if the status code is 200 or not. Or for example, if we don't have an account ID, so if we don't have that account ID, we also wanna return a reply. But if we do have, we wanna append inside the request an account ID, okay? So how can we do that? Basically, all we need to do is add an account ID to be equal to an account ID. But this is gonna throw us a few errors saying that Fastify does not recognize this. So we can just modify this a bit and say like, request as a Fastify reply, and we can just add a new property named account ID to be a string. Okay. And what is wrong here right now? Request as Fastify account ID. Oh yeah, it's Fastify request. So let's get this from Fastify request because we're appending it inside the request, all right? And now all we need to do here inside the, we need to pass that along so that our route adapter, because we are adding this inside the middleware, but we need to pass this forward now for the route adapter, okay? Now this is gonna also be super simple. All we need to do here is, you can see that it already has an account ID for us. Okay, but let's create now an account ID, a property, and the account ID will basically get that account ID from the request. So it's just going to be a request.account ID, but we don't know if that account ID actually exists or not. So we can do the same thing. We can get the request as Fastify requests and add it to it. Okay, and if that's undefined, it's okay. There's no problem if that's undefined because we're not actually checking that. And you can see that we already have no errors anymore, and we can just paste this to here. All right, so now after that, let's check if our account ID is actually working or not. So let me go back here. Let me restart the server. Okay, I had to restart a few things here, but the good thing is that it's finally working back again. So back on the port 3000, which is where I am right now. Let's actually test this and see what happens. Okay, so we're returning new. Shouldn't be returning new. We can check that in a minute. And here we are also not seeing the console.log. So let's go back here inside of our list controller account ID. Let's add something like this just to make sure. Let's hit save. We are returning this new, okay? So let's just track our steps back again. So we have our payload, we have our status code 200, and of course we need to pass here our account ID should be here payload dot sub. We need to pass that along so that we can actually capture that change. Okay, so now when I hit save, we can actually see all the leads, and here we have the account ID. So that's great. That's all we need to create our, so here we just for a recap, we have our middleware adapter Okay, pretty simple one. This one, for now, we're just basically working with the auth middleware to connect with it. And otherwise, we're just gonna pass it forward. There's no problems with that at all. Of course, this can be enhanced, but the point is that we are decoupling the whole project to use middlewares. Here we can see that we are using JWT, but in the next video, I'll be removing all this JSON Web Token, and you're gonna see that it's gonna be super simple. Okay, so that's all that we need to create a good and simple but like effective handler middleware. And here we have our middleware adapter with our make of middleware, and that's gonna be added to multiple routes. Not supposed to gonna get, for example, like a get me or something like me, so like a profile page. We also can just add it like this, and we are good to go. Okay, so that's it. Now let's just refactor this project a little bit and make this even better using Fastify. Okay, so now let's move to the last part of our video, and the goal for this part is really to refactor this and make this even better. And we are not gonna use the JSON Web Token library anymore. We're gonna keep using Fastify now with Fastify plugins, and we're gonna be using dependency injection in order to make this all work together. Okay, so the first thing that I'm gonna do is move back here, and I'm gonna install the Fastify JWT. Okay, so that's the first thing that I'm gonna do right now. And it's something that is really good about Fastify JWT is that it's super easy to use it. All you need to do is go here in our Fastify call, and all we need to do is do a register, and we're gonna be calling JWT Fastify. Okay, let's import it. Import JWT Fastify from at JWT Fastify JWT. Okay, and now it's super simple. All we need to do is pass our secret, which we already know. It's inside env. So we have application env config dot JWT secret. And the other thing that we need to set here is the expirational time. So we have here an expires in, and we can keep the same style with 1 day. So that's great. That's all we need. So we no longer need to be doing the signing process inside our use case. We can do this in here. All right. Another thing that I would like to do is come back here into server and create a routes.ts file. Okay. So here inside routes.ts, I'm gonna have two different functions. I'm gonna create a function, name it public routes, and public routes will accept a Fastify property, which is a Fastify instance, if I'm not mistaken. Yep. And I'm also gonna have here a private route. Okay. And here, all that we need to do now is I'm gonna cut this and basically paste for the public ones instead of this could be app, like, but let's just keep Fastify since we are working with Fastify inside here. Let's do Fastify like this and import all that we need, route adapter. Okay, and the other thing that we're gonna do is the same thing, but this time for the private ones. Right, so let's come back here, use it here. We don't have this me route, so let's just clean this and use Fastify here. Now, one thing that is really nice is that once our application starts to grow, and we don't want to like have multiple pre-handlers for something that every route will need, right? So one of the things that we can do is use this property from Fastify, which is this add hook in here. And basically inside this add hook, all we need to do is use the property that we want to use, so like pre-handler, and then paste whatever we have inside pre-handler in here. Okay, so with that we can remove it, and you see that it's already set. Perfect. Now we can clean this a little bit more, and let's just test and see if it's all working fine. So let me go back here to Bruno, do assigning, route not found. Yeah, because we're not registering our route. So let's do app.register, and we're gonna call the public routes. And let's do the same thing this time for the private routes, okay? Let's clean this up. Okay, now let's test again. Internal server error, Prisma find unique. Let's try the, you can see the private one is fine. Let me do a sign up. Internal server error, Prisma account find unique. Okay. Current database. Oh, I know what this is about. I have turned off my, you can see here in containers that our PG is no longer running, because we're gonna use Docker Compose for this. So let's just, trust me, this is gonna work. You can see that the route is still working, that's what we need. But I stopped at Docker, just, I mean, we can just get it back. I'm getting a few errors, I was testing a few things. But we're gonna create a Docker Compose in this class, and that's why it's not working right now. But trust me, it's working. You can see from the leads get property, all right? So now let's do something that is really important, which is actually removing both. If we go back here to signing use case now, because we're gonna work with use cases. If we go here to signing, I don't want to use this JWT signing anymore, but we can't just have like use the reply.jwt from the routes. It's not part of the goal to have Fastify and routes inside our use case. So we're gonna work with dependency injection for this. So all I'm gonna do, I'm gonna create a constructor, private read only, and I'm gonna call this, we can call this encrypt, okay? And here inside our interface, we're gonna create something that will help us do that. I'm gonna call this we can call this token provider, which is gonna be a provider that's gonna handle for us basically the signing and the verify properties. That's what we use today. So I'm gonna export token provider. You can name this basically whatever you want, and we're gonna have the signing, which is gonna be receiving a payload, and the payload is basically a record, in other words an object, which is gonna have a string and any, and this is gonna basically return for us a promise with a string. Now we're gonna have something really similar, but now for the verify. The verify now will receive a token, which is just a string that we're gonna receive from the clients, and this one will return a promise, but this is a record with a string. It could be string, could be any, and it could even be a no return, okay? So this is the token provider, and that's what we need to use here. So let's import this token provider here. And now instead of using this JWT, all we're gonna do is a this.encrypt.signing, okay? And let's just remove this. And since, as you can see, we only have an object with the sub, which is the account ID, okay, which is the information that we want to encrypt in our signing. It's getting an error because this is gonna return a promise, so we gotta do an await here. And yeah, we forgot that. Okay, so that's the first step. You can see that we are no longer using either the .env or the JWT token in here, okay? Now we're gonna do the same thing, but this time for the auth middleware, okay? I can even come back here, copy this, and paste at the top, and import it, and you're gonna see that it's gonna work pretty much the same. If I come back here and do a this.encrypt.verify, you can see that the token's being used, okay? But this time, this is gonna return a payload, which is a record or a string. So we can just remove this, and saying like, if there is no payload, then we just throw an error, okay? And here we're gonna just use this payload since there's no payload dot sub, all right? So with that in mind, let's just come back here. Okay, it's replacing, okay, let me check here back again. Okay, so I found out the reason why it was not working. So basically I forgot to add an await here, because as you can see from the I token, this also returns a promise, so we need to make sure that we are using that. Okay, so now that we are using both the verify, we can also claim from here as well, which is looking good. Now we're gonna change our factories a little bit. So that's the power of using factories, is that we can now use that to inject instances. So the auth meter, right? The auth meter requires an argument. And what does auth meter requires? It requires the JWT decoder, okay? So we're gonna first right now create our JWT adapter, and inside adapters, I'm gonna create a new file, name it JWT adapter.ts, okay? And this one is gonna be a class, right? And we are gonna use, we could actually even move this adapter into the application, but let's just, since it's adapter and it's a small application, we can keep it like this. And this is just gonna be a JWT adapter. We can actually move that. I think it makes even more sense. But let's just keep it like this for now, and do an implement I token provider, okay? And this I token provider, as we spoke, receiving a sync, and this I token provider has a signing, and also it has a verify property, all right? Now the payload, now this one, now is the time that we are actually gonna use the Fastify in order to work with that, okay? So the first thing that we need to do is having a constructor that will inject that inside here. So let's do a constructor private read only, and now we need to have a Fastify instance. Let's have Fastify instance in here, and we are actually gonna use it to check if that is valid or not. So that's a return await this dot Fastify dot I think I'm forgetting a few things. You have the Fastify instance, yeah, JWT dot signing, okay? Now all we need to do is paste the payload here, and I don't think we need this await, because this is not gonna return, yeah, this is not gonna return a promise. Now this, on the other hand, is gonna return a promise, and now this is for the verify one. So if we come back here and change this to verify and paste the token, that's basically all we need for this to be working, okay? Now here inside the adapter, what we are gonna do is something a little bit different, okay? We're gonna go back here and we're gonna do a const, and we're gonna call JWT adapter, and we're gonna call this new JWT adapter, okay? Now the JWT adapter also requires, remember, the Fastify instance. So we're gonna be receiving the Fastify instance in here. We can also type this Fastify instance and paste this inside here, all right? And now something pretty similar will happen to our signing use case and our signing controller, okay? So let's have our JWT adapter. Let's inject it inside here. Let's use the Fastify instance, all right? Let's remove this. And now remember that the sign up controller, since our signing controller, yeah. Now this also needs to have the Fastify instance being passed to it, Fastify instance, okay? And now let's also paste this in here. And the last thing that we're gonna need is actually use that Fastify that we have inside here and pass it along both to the signing and to our protected routes, okay? So that was a lot. Let me do a Docker compose up, Docker start PG, which is our Postgres, Docker. Let's just do a Docker run. You have, I think I have removed the name. Let me check this again. Images. Let's just stop this one. Let's just delete. Images. Let's just, it's not running. Okay. Oh, it's in use, but it's not running. Let me check here. Okay, so this is what was happening, all right? I have the clone of this project running, and I was running that other Docker container, and it was on the same port. So what I had to do was to restart it, remove it. So I just did a Docker stop on that image name, and I did a Docker start PG. So now it's all up in here. Let's go back here to containers. You can see that PG is running in here, okay? So with all that done, we can actually check and see if this is working or not. If I come back here to sign up, let's do another name. I don't know, Matthew something, and use the, I don't know, something like test user, another password. Before we use another password, let's test the error handling. So if I don't paste, you can see that the errors are still valid and working. If I come back here and do a send, we can see that we have a 204. If we go back with this email and password and return it here, do a send, we get an access token, and so on and so on. Of course, unfortunately, we're not gonna see any difference here in the leads if I change the auth. That's a shame, but it's something that you can do, and I highly recommend you doing that, okay? So let's just commit. There's a lot here, and that's kind of annoying me. So let's just do a git commit feeds project structure and refactor on routes and JWT logic, okay? Now, last thing that I want to do with you. So in the beginning of this class, we initiated our Postgres image with this super long sentence to actually run it, okay? So the first thing that I want to do is stop this image that we have. So if I go here to images, to containers, there is no container running. So the first thing that I want to do is go back here at the root source and create a docker compose.yml file so that you or any other person can actually use this, and it's gonna be way simpler than just pasting this in your in your terminal. You could definitely add a readme file and paste this, but it's just not right or good for other people to use it. All right, so it's gonna be super simple. Basically, what I wanna do is take this and transform it into something other people can use. So let's do an example here. So we can create services, and you can name this whatever you want. I'm gonna call this YouTube class PG, something like that. The image that we are gonna be using, of course, add it here. The image that we are gonna be using is the Postgres. You can actually add the version here. We can add the container name. So here you can add whatever you want. I like to keep the same name, so you can do like this. Environment. Okay, so now this is the place where we set like the Postgres user and so on and so on. So here we can set this as root and copy and paste make the password, and we have the user, the password, and the Postgres DB. Can also add this one, so we can actually call this our name. Okay, so here, if we go back here to Docker run PG, so instead of PG, we can name this, for example, like YouTube class PG. Okay, now that's basically all we need. I'm just gonna add the port here, so we're gonna have a 5432, forwarding it to 5432, which is our container name. I think this one is just I think that's like this. Okay, that's all we need. So as I mentioned to you, there's nothing running in Docker now, so all we need to do is do a Docker run, Docker compose run, if I'm not mistaken, Docker compose start. So it's a Docker compose So all you need to do is come back here, do a Docker compose up -d, and you can see that it started the container YouTube class PG. If I come back here and do a Docker compose start, you can see now in our Docker that we have the Node.js API JWT, which is the folder name here. And here in images, we can see that the Postgres is running right now, okay? Now, if I come back here and go to Bruno and actually use here, you can see that we have an error. So this is not connected. If I come back here to Prisma, I probably know why this is not working. So we have the provider, PostgreSQL, the provider name. Okay, so I found it. So it's pnpm exec Prisma migrate deploy, I guess. Pnpm Prisma migrate deploy. Okay. And now if we do that, you can see that we only have the Docker here, change it. I come back here and do a send. You can see that now it's all working because the data and the migrations have been populated back again, okay? So it was a lot. We've done a lot throughout this course. It's a big, you can see that even though the authentication is not super difficult to understand, we have applied many important patterns in here, including using factory, using dependency injection, controlling everything from separating in different folders, using use cases, controllers, Prisma, migrations, a lot of things was built in only this small project. And I hope that at least the core function, like handling the sign-in, the sign-up, protecting routes, that makes sense to you, okay? So I hope that you like this video, and I see you in the next one. Probably the next video will be using refresh tokens, which is super useful, especially in big applications. Like it's not a good practice at all to leave a token to be that long, like 1 day to expires is a lot of time, but it's also a short time to the user, so they need to every day have to be authenticated. So there are some pros and cons of leaving this small and when we're not using refresh token, but when we use refresh token, then things get much better for security concerns and also UX, how the UX will feel, okay, how the user experience will perceive our application, okay? So I hope that you liked this video. It was a long one, and if you have any questions or any improvements that I need to be doing in my next videos, please let me know in the comments, and I'll be also adding the repository to this entire project, okay? I see you in the next one. Thank you very much for your time, and that's it. Bye bye.